holding together. And I think Elton John done an absolutely marvellous job. He brought the people were in tears, like, outside.
Elton John's song and Earl Spencer's speech seemed to generate the strongest nerve for the public, at least. Certainly rounds of applause that we heard seemed to come from them. Anything else about, certainly Earl Spencer's speech, that you thought was provocative or interesting?
Just the whole general music and everything, just the mood of the people, really.
Where do you go now? Around here there's a strange sense of listlessness, really, as if people are emotionally washed out. You know, they've had this very tightly controlled format to their day this morning. Where do they go now?
I think people just lose themselves in the crowd, really, just make their way around the city, subdued, don't know where to go. Okay. Generally home.
Thanks, David. Right. Chris, you didn't actually make it to Westminster Abbey, but you saw the scenes along the Mall. As moving as you expected?
Yes, it was, yes. I arrived about 10 o'clock and managed to see Diana as she went by. And as I walked towards Buckingham Palace, you could feel the atmosphere. It became a lot quieter, and you could actually, more or less, you could feel it.
OK. Chris, Dermot, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. Back to you, Martin.
Colin, thank you. And let's rejoin Emma Hurd, who's in the Mall.
Well, we're getting more reaction here from some of the thousands of mourners who've been lining the route. Joining me now are three ladies who've been here since the early hours of this morning just to see this funeral cortege go by and to listen to the service. Can you tell me, first of all, Carol, what emotions were you feeling as the hearse went past on its final route home?
I was just so terribly sad. I just felt so bad for the princes, and I just was very emotional.
It was an extremely emotional moment, standing here in the street, seeing everyone in silence, looking up at those tannoys, staring into space, listening to the service. What particular moment got to you emotionally the most?
The Elton John piece, and also her brother's speech. That was really sad.
My brother's speech, I mean, that was just, well, I don't think words can say what everybody feels, I think he was very brave, and he obviously loved his sister very much, like everybody does.
Suzanne, you were saying that you feel emotionally drained after today.
I really do feel emotionally drained. I still can't believe it, and I don't think a lot of people can, really.
Pat, you've come from Biggin Hill again in the early hours of this morning. What brought you here? Why do you feel the need to come?
Well, I want to pay my last respects, and you want to feel all as one person. It's just a terrible thing to have happened, and our hearts go out to the boys, to both families. I think it's, we can, we all have our thoughts, and we can all share it together on this day, and everybody's crying. We all feel the same, dreadfully distraught.
She was so happy in them last few weeks with Dodie, and whatever anybody says or thinks, he did make her happy.
But there is also an air of relief, I think, almost here on the Mall. Now that the procession is over, there's a collective sort of sigh almost, isn't there?
Yes, there is. So, yes. I really don't know what to say. I don't think it's so difficult. So difficult.
Now, all three here carrying flowers again to be taken to one of the royal palaces, where really there are now more than 1 million bouquets laid there in honour of Diana, Princess of Wales. Bouquets which began being laid there early on Sunday morning, and I'm sure it will continue well into next week. From here, for now, that's it.
Emma, in the Mall, thank you. And here we see once again the M1 motorway. Police outriders and the two patrol vehicles coordinating the staged closing of this motorway, ready for the royal cortege.
Well, are we starting with the two?
And once Diana's coffin has passed by a particular site, a phased reopening of it as well, with other police cars keeping members of the public a discreet distance to the rear. Once again, we see traffic nearly at a standstill on the southbound carriageway. We're told that on bridges and parapets over this motorway there have been people, sometimes hundreds deep, taking their opportunity to pay their last respects to Diana, Princess of Wales.
Yes, I can, Stan.
Here
We're
again,
leaving the pictures of the
police have
hearse there,
allowed
making
mourners
its way
to
up
gather.
to Orthrop. And we'll be crossing to some of our reporters who are still out on the scene in London, where the reaction from the people has just been extraordinary on this quite unique day. They called it a unique funeral for a unique person, and indeed it has been quite an overwhelming one for us here in London as well, to observe the people, their reactions, and the princess. She was the people's princess indeed.
Their reactions, in particular to that speech by Earl Spencer, has been universal around all the sites that we've been to. They were very, very impressed with him and what he had to say, particularly the point that he made about the blood relatives looking after the boys in future, and the distinction he made between that family and the royal family is very, very interesting.
Well, let's get some reaction out on the streets now with Stan Grant. Stan?
Yes, and well, as you can see, probably behind me now, there are people who are just filing by the gates outside Westminster Abbey, soaking up some of the atmosphere here, reading some of the cards and looking at the floral tributes that have been placed here to Princess Diana. You know, words can really not describe the mood that was here. We all try, but inevitably we fall short, because what we're talking about is human emotion and feeling, and that is by its very nature indefinable. It comes from somewhere deep inside, and when you look at it on such a grand scale like this, a mass grieving, it becomes even more baffling, even more mysterious. I suppose the answer is the love of Princess Diana.
Yes, indeed. Well, the Queen opened her heart to the people last night, and the people in turn have opened their hearts today.
Well, they certainly have, and I think more than just the terrible tragedy of taking Princess Diana's life, but what she represented, Anne, I think she represented a new vibrancy, a new hope for the future. And many people feel that's been snuffed out. I think it was most eloquently put, as everyone has agreed, by Princess Diana's brother, Earl Spencer, when he said that she didn't need a royal title to be special. And then he went on to say that she doesn't need to be canonised. Her memory does not need to be revered in that way. She wasn't a saint. He talked about her innermost suffering, her insecurities, her battles with eating disorders, all of the things that made her so very human, and of course the things that attracted all the people to her, why she was known as the People's Princess. And we're also reminded, of course, of that extraordinary reading by British Prime Minister Tony Blair, when he spoke, I suppose, in essence, of what is a man if he has not loved. And Princess Diana is someone who did love. She loved her family. She loved her two boys. Today, such an extraordinary credit to her. I saw them as they arrived behind the cortege, and there was a comforting hand placed on both William and Harry's back by their uncle Earl Spencer as they went through into Westminster Abbey. There, they displayed a maturity well beyond their years. But we must stop and think about the man, because when they're alone, in their quieter moments, they will again be boys of 15 and 13. You and I, the people here from all over the world, the media, even the people grieving, are in a sense, I suppose, passengers on this journey. We'll get off at the next stop, we'll get on with our lives, but every day they'll live with that terrible hole in their life that they have lost their mother, and it's an extraordinary thing to have to overcome. And I suppose that incredible brave face they put on today was just all the more moving for knowing that these are young boys of 15 and 13.
Yes, they displayed just a remarkable sense of courage, and they just didn't waver, did they? They were just so strong, and they moved without shedding a tear, certainly not what we saw by any chance.
I think, Anne, perhaps that goes back to what went on last week. We did hear a lot of criticism of the royal family and the way that they had not commented publicly in the early stages after Princess Diana's death. But we can only wonder at what went on behind the scenes and how these boys were prepared for this moment. You're not talking about ordinary boys, even though at the end of the day, that's probably what they are. You're talking about a future king of England, someone who's going to have to lead his people, and someone today who put on an extraordinary show of strength and bravery. And I suppose we must make mention, while we're talking about the service as well, of that extraordinary performance by Elton John. We know that he has been a great friend of Princess Diana's over the years. He'd rewritten the words to his famous song, Candle in the Wind, and to have performed it in such a heart-wrenching fashion, knowing he was under such strain himself, really touched so many hearts. And I was looking around just outside while the performance was going on, while he was singing, and people were openly weeping, holding each other for comfort, just wondering, I suppose, how and why this happened, and as the words of the song spelled out, where they're going to go to from here now that this light has been snuffed out.
He did very well to get through it, Stan, didn't he? What was the reaction that you heard there to Earl Spencer's speech?
Well, people were clapping, they were applauding. They applauded on several instances. They applauded when he mentioned that Diana did not need a royal title, especially over the last year of her life. They applauded when he talked about Diana's frailties, her human frailties that made her one of the ordinary people, although in extraordinary circumstances. They also applauded when he talked about the blood relatives. You've made mention of that. I suppose everyone has commented about that. That was a clear distinction between the role the royal family, the official family, will play in his life, and the role that the Spencer family will play. He talked about allowing their spirits to soar. And I think everyone has now agreed. Of course, I must make mention that there was an enormous round of applause when he said they must be shielded from the paparazzi. I suppose that it goes without saying, and I suppose those wishes will be respected.
And the future of the monarchy seems to be in William's hands. The reaction to William?
Well, initially, of course, many people around here are even wondering whether, in fact, Prince Charles will ever ascend to the throne, whether, in fact, he will pass over and hand it to William. I suppose that'd be an almost poetic ending to all of this, but William is a young man. We haven't seen him come into full maturity yet. He's had to deal with so much during his life, the breakup of his parents, an extraordinary glare of publicity, losing his mother at such a young age, enduring all of this and all the pressure that he had to bear today. Obviously, that's going to model his character. He's going to be a man of enormous strength, if anything today is to go by. Where in fact that leaves the monarchy, obviously Prince William and Prince Harry are very dear to the hearts of the people here. They are the future of the monarchy.
Certainly wasn't a dry eye here during the service, and as you mentioned, not a dry eye out for the hundreds of millions of billions of mourners over the entire world who've been watching this service. Certainly, from a mother's point of view, I don't think any mother could have bared seeing those two boys walking so courageously behind their mother's coffin, knowing that she will never be there for them again, put their arms around them and give them a hug.
Thank you, Stan. Do you have anything further to report from there before we leave you at Westminster?
I suppose all I would say, David, is that it's been an extraordinary thing to witness this incredible outpouring of grief here. Things are breaking up around me now. People are going about their separate ways, but they're deep in thought. This has been a very solemn occasion, and I think you hit it right on the head. This is a time when you want to go home and hug your own family and realise, I think, what is very important to you, because it can all be gone in a flash.
Certainly can. Stan, thank you so much for that.
Tim Stott's just joined us here at the studio, and if we can just pan across a little bit or get a shot at Tim. Tim, you can report on where you've been today and what sort of reaction you received.
Amazing scenes. You know, when this happened a week ago, it was obviously total shock. And then during the week, that incredible sadness that just enveloped the whole country. And what I noticed out there today, for the first time, there was a positive vibe. I mean, you really felt the people in Hyde Park. There were thousands of them, and we got up on the stage where the video screens were relaying the service, and there was a real sort of energy about it. And I noticed that it was informal. There were people lounging around on the grass. It was like, it was exactly the way, it was really like Princess of Wales herself. It was casual, it was relaxed, but it was still reverent and respectful and polite. And that's what got me about it. You could really feel that for the first time, a week later, people are starting to draw something positive about this. The Queen said yesterday about, let's be together and be united in our grief. And what I got the sense of out there today, look at these people, they're very sad, but they're together. You could, so many people, how many people would be there? Thousands and thousands of people, you could hear a pin drop.
Now, these are your pictures coming in off your tape now. Where's this exactly?
This is it's near the Serpentine at Hyde Park. It's in the centre of Hyde Park. I must say that the Brits, when they organise these sort of things, they do it very, very well. They had cranes holding big speakers up, 2 sets of video screens, relaying what was going on inside. a few points which really stuck on the crowd, I think. The first was when Diana's brother got up and really, you know, I suppose a service in Westminster Abbey is meant to be non-political and polite, but he really gave it to the media, gave it to paparazzi, and the crowd there, they absolutely loved it. They, you know, they made a big show of it. The second point, of course, was Elton John doing his reworked version of Candle in the Wind, and that got absolutely tumultuous applause.
They seem to be a largely young gathering here, would you say?
Yeah, well, I don't think they get invited with the Archbishop of Canterbury, do you, with their bib and brace overalls and tattoos and stuff. Like I said, this is the laid-back crowd. These are the real mourners. I think, you know, the Princess of Wales made a point throughout her whole time, throughout her works of getting in touch with the common people. There they all were, and everyone, you know, the solidarity you could really feel.
And I suppose the crowds being such, you didn't have an opportunity to move around much, very hard to move, so most of these pictures are in that same spot.
It's a matter of plant your feet in the ground and get what you can. It was absolutely chock-a-block there.
Tim, you've recently returned from reporting in Paris. What's the mood of the people there after the tragedy that unfolded?
It's I couldn't believe that 30 kilometres of English Channel could create such an incredible divide. The mood in France is so much different. There's almost an embarrassment in Paris that it happened on their soil, and I suppose that's sort of a bit of French sort of, you know, don't blame us, but, you know, we're sorry at the same time. And when I came back to Britain yesterday, what I noticed straight away was just how deep the sorrow was, and I'd missed all that being a week in Paris. The French are more concerned with who's to blame, pointing the finger. It's don't blame our tunnel, don't blame our roads, don't blame our chauffeur, don't blame our cars, our licensing system. It's all about the machinations of it all. Whereas when I came back, I noticed people didn't really care about that. It's just a sense of loss.
Do you think there's any blame at all to be attached to any of the authorities in France? I mean, I detected a slight indication that the police may not have actually done the job as 100% as people would have expected.
I think I said during the week that they would be sharing the blame would be shared through many different bodies in France, and that's what they're having trouble coming to terms with. That, you know, they've got a very aggressive paparazzi who must share the blame. They had a drunk driver who was allowed to drive a limousine out of one of the city's top hotels, who was allowed to circumvent their strict licensing laws on these sort of things. So, yeah, it's not over yet. The judicial process is very slow there. It will take many months, but many people, I think, will share the blame.
OK, Tim, thank you very much for that. And do you have anything further to report before we'll let you go? We'll wring every last second out of you here.
Yeah, so we made a point today of, you know, trying to get a bit of the Australian side of it, I suppose, down there and looking at people. And we found people who'd been out since 2 o'clock this morning. The 5 girls tucked under one little duvet. Classic backpackers. There were their really cheap and nasty food, a jar of Vegemite and some white sliced bread. They've been huddled under this one blanket since 2 in the morning. They realised by about 8 that they could have turned up at 9:05 and still seen the procession down to Westminster Abbey, but it didn't matter. It was part of the experience, and they all said to us that this was, you know, they couldn't be in London without being in contact with something like this. And what I particularly noticed too is you can see it on television. You can see the pictures of Diana slow-mode down and endlessly replayed on television. You can see them put the music and those slow dissolves and effects that we're all so fond of. But when you see that coffin in that hearse going down the street, people absolutely cut to the quick. And these girls, like, you know, Aussie girls on a working holiday, they've seen Diana from 17,000 kilometres away. They've grown up with her like we all have. And suddenly, there it is, going at 3 miles an hour down the street. It's astonishing.
Yes, it is astonishing, and more so because many people have never actually met Diana. I did have the opportunity to meet her in Australia on her most recent trip. She came down to do 2 functions, and I was fortunate enough to host the Commonwealth Day Council lunch that occurred there. And she was really more beautiful and more gracious and more charming in real life. People tell you this and you don't believe it until you actually see her. Her skin was like buffed and her eyes were even a deeper blue than you see in pictures. And her beauty and her voice actually caught my attention as well. She had the most incredible mellifluous voice. Didn't say that particularly well. She had a charm about her, a naturalness. She spoke to the people, and at this lunch, which was full of all sorts of people, young and old and middle class and poor and whatever, because they all wanted to come and see the People's Princess, even in Australia, she made a beeline for the children. She would go straight to them, for the disabled children. She'd go and put her arms around them. She would go to the elderly. If she saw someone who looked pretty normal and okay and dressed quite well and wearing a hat, she'd just smile politely and keep on going. But she'd find the people in the crowd that had something that she felt she could give them, some sort of vulnerability that I think she felt she had as well. And it was indeed an honour to meet her, and something I will certainly never forget.
And I noticed when I first was sent over here, I'd seen her on TV like everyone had, and got sent out to my first function, of which the Princess of Wales was present. And it really is that one of those people that in real life it just froze you, just stood you on the spot when you saw her. That she had a sort of magnetism about her. And the great shame I thought about spending so long targeting her personal life, which was littered with disasters, there's no doubt about that. She made some great mistakes. The great shame was that everyone actually missed just the competency and the skills she built up in the pursuit of her causes. She didn't just turn up to functions, put a tiara on, a string of pearls and get photographed and raise money. She had a great knowledge of all the causes she was into. She could do 3 speeches a day on landmines, make them all different, off the cuff, not a problem. And
well,
that
actually,
got lost
she
in the
was
wash.
quite nervous in Australia. When she came to this lunch, she'd been to the function the evening before, the Victor Chang function, and spoken. She was due to speak at the lunch, and she's told the organisers, "I'm too nervous." She said, "I really don't feel up to making a second speech." So all lunch she sat there very quietly, talking to the public and just doing the one-on-one, but she didn't want to get up on stage. And finally, at the very end, she had an opportunity to come on stage and greet the youngsters. As you know, she loved to be with children, so she came up on stage and she shook people's hands and, you know, she kissed the children. And then she turned to the organiser and said, "I would like to say something." And at that point, she turned to me with her flowers and with her handbag and said, sort of this look on her face, quite perplexed, what am I going to do with these? So I took them from her and guided her to the microphone. And she spoke very beautifully, of course, and very movingly. But you could see and sense that it was a real ordeal for her to make a public speech, that it was hard for her to stand in front of a microphone and talk to people en masse. But one-on-one, she just had that most amazing rapport, and I think that's what people will remember her for.
Well, one of the highlights of today, as we've been telling you since the service, was that speech by Earl Spencer, and we're now going to replay it once again, so here it is.
I stand before you today, the representative of a family in grief, in a country in mourning, before a world in shock. We're all united, not only in our desire to pay our respects to Diana, but rather in our need to do so. For such was her extraordinary appeal that the tens of millions of people taking part in this service all over the world, via television and radio, who never actually met her, feel that they too lost someone close to them in the early hours of Sunday morning. It is a more remarkable tribute to Diana than I can ever hope to offer her today. Diana was the very essence of compassion, of duty, of style, of beauty. All over the world, she was a symbol of selfless humanity, a standard bearer for the rights of the truly downtrodden, a very British girl who transcended nationality, someone with a natural nobility who was classless, and who proved in the last year that she needed no royal title to continue to generate her particular brand of magic. Today is our chance to say thank you for the way you brightened our lives, even though God granted you but half a life. We will all feel cheated, always, that you were taken from us so young, and yet we must learn to be grateful that you came along at all. Only now you are gone do we truly appreciate what we are now without, and we want you to know that life without you is very, very difficult. We have all despaired at our loss over the past week, and only the strength of the message you gave us through your years of giving has afforded us the strength to move forward. There is a temptation to rush to canonize your memory. There is no need to do so. You stand tall enough as a human being of unique qualities, not to need to be seen as a saint. Indeed, to sanctify your memory would be to miss out on the very core of your being, your wonderfully mischievous sense of humor with a laugh that bent you double, your joy for life transmitted wherever you took your smile and the sparkle in those unforgettable eyes, your boundless energy which you could barely contain. But your greatest gift was your intuition, and it was a gift you used wisely. This is what underpinned all your other wonderful attributes. And if we look to analyze what it was about you that had such a wide appeal, we find it in your instinctive feel for what was really important in all our lives. Without your God-given sensitivity, we would be immersed in greater ignorance at the anguish of AIDS and HIV sufferers, the plight of the homeless, the isolation of lepers, the random destruction of landmines. Diana explained to me once that it was her innermost feelings of suffering that made it possible for her to connect with her constituency of the rejected. And here we come to another truth about her. For all the status, the glamour, the applause, Diana remained throughout a very insecure person at heart, almost childlike in her desire to do good for others so she could release herself from deep feelings of unworthiness, of which her eating disorders were merely a symptom. The world sensed this part of her character and cherished her for her vulnerability, whilst admiring her for her honesty. The last time I saw Diana was on July the 1st, her birthday in London, when typically she was not taking time to celebrate her special day with friends, but was guest of honor at a fundraising charity evening. She sparkled, of course, but I would rather cherish the days I spent with her in March, when she came to visit me and my children in our home in South Africa. I am proud of the fact that, apart from when she was on public display meeting President Mandela, we managed to contrive to stop the ever-present paparazzi from getting a single picture of her. That meant a lot to her. These were days I will always treasure. It was as if we had been transported back to our childhood, when we spent such an enormous amount of time together, the two youngest in the family. Fundamentally, she hadn't changed at all from the big sister who mothered me as a baby, fought with me at school, and endured those long train journeys between our parents' homes with me at weekends. It is a tribute to her level-headedness and strength that despite the most bizarre life imaginable after her childhood, she remained intact, true to herself. There is no doubt that she was looking for a new direction in her life at this time. She talked endlessly of getting away from England, mainly because of the treatment that she received at the hands of the newspapers. I don't think she ever understood why her genuinely good intentions were sneered at by the media, why there appeared to be a permanent quest on their behalf to bring her down. It is baffling. My own and only explanation is that genuine goodness is threatening to those at the opposite end of the moral spectrum. It is a point to remember that of all the ironies about Diana, perhaps the greatest was this: a girl given the name of the ancient goddess of hunting was, in the end, the most hunted person of the modern age. She would want us today to pledge ourselves to protecting her beloved boys, William and Harry, from a similar fate. And I do this here, Diana, on your behalf. We will not allow them to suffer the anguish that used regularly to drive you to tearful despair. And beyond that, on behalf of your mother and sisters, I pledge that we, your blood family, will do all we can to continue the imaginative and loving way in which you are steering these two exceptional young men, so that their souls are not simply immersed by duty and tradition, but can sing openly as you planned. We fully respect the heritage into which they have both been born, and will always respect and encourage them in their royal role. But we, like you, recognize the need for them to experience as many different aspects of life as possible, to arm them spiritually and emotionally for the years ahead. I know you would have expected nothing less from us. William and Harry, we all care desperately for you today. We're all chewed up with sadness at the loss of a woman who wasn't even our mother. How great your suffering is, we cannot even imagine. I would like to end by thanking God for the small mercies he's shown us at this dreadful time, for taking Diana at her most beautiful and radiant, and when she had joy in her private life. Above all, we give thanks for the life of a woman I'm so proud to be able to call my sister. The unique, the complex, the extraordinary and irreplaceable Diana, whose beauty, both internal and external, will never be extinguished from our minds.
A moving tribute from Charles Earl Spencer. And spontaneous applause breaks out in Westminster Abbey. I've never heard that before, for a tribute.
They don't know who I am.
Well, that was the Earl of Spencer's tribute to his sister Diana, Princess of Wales, and quite an extraordinary speech, one that will go down in history, Susanna Carr.
Thanks, Anne. It was an amazing service, and I think the selection of people who were at the service was quite astounding too. A large number of people from the entertainment industry, people like Pavarotti, Christa Berg, the singer who was very famous for that song Lady in Red, which I know he dedicated to her on one particular concert. Her great friend Richard Branson, the head of the Virgin Empire. It was actually Richard Branson who prompted the addition of the extra books of condolence, because at that stage there were only 5 books of condolence and people were queuing for so many hours. The actor Tom Conti was there, Sir Richard Attenborough, and our own Clive James was there too, a well-known friend of the Princess. Apparently they lunched frequently and hilariously, and I'm sure she's a friend of his who he'll miss dramatically.
All who knew her described her as having a wonderful sense of humour, a wicked sense of humour, quite a giggle, something that she didn't show to the public so much. I mean, we saw her beautiful smiling face and her graciousness and her kindness and her warmth, but we didn't ever see that sense of humour. She seemed to hide that, although when you read much of the press here in London, and she had forged many friendships with many editors and journalists, she actually told them a lot of things that we didn't get to hear about, stories that they kept to themselves, and they always report about what she said without giving specifics, and said that she just had a wonderful sense of humour and she loved to be surrounded by people. And then also the stories that she would go and visit hospitals at midnight, cancer patients, young children who were sick, and she just didn't want anyone to know about it, but she'd slip quietly into the hospitals and poke her head around the corner, open up a curtain and say, "Is it okay if I come in?"
Yes.
And they'd say, and the mother would say, "Oh yes, please do," and then sit down and watch a television show with them, put her feet up, eat a chocolate bar, and in one particular instance, she even offered to take their washing home.
I bet she didn't do it herself.
I'm sure not.
No, but she did that. She visited people regularly. I know she took Prince William with her on many occasions because she said she felt that William had it in him, that he had that special quality, that he had understanding, and I felt that she believed that he would carry on her work. Little did she realise how soon she was going to be needing to call on him to take over her role.
Yes.
And let's hope he has some privacy in his life for the few years that he's got left before he's an adult.
Well, certainly the Earl of Spencer said he would do his utmost to ensure that. How he will succeed in doing it, I really don't know. But it was also interesting to hear many of the mourners looking at Prince William and seeing the remarkable resemblance to his mother, and saying, "Your mother will live on through you, and we just need to look at your face and we see Diana."
But her nature is reflected in his too, because they have so many similar pieces of body language, the tilting of the head, the blushing, the sort of shyness and rather serious side. I think the last time we saw the really humorous side of Diana was when Fergie was on the scene in the royal family before she and Prince Andrew split up, because the two of them had those photo calls on the Alps where they were giggling and falling over and being frowned upon by the rest of the royal family. And after that, when Fergie left, she seemed to pull back quite a great deal.
Yes, she did. It was interesting to see Fergie there today, and I think very consolidating for her children and Prince Andrew to be there with the royal family. They really seemed to put a concerted show of strength in having the entire family there, and the way they moved outside of Buckingham Palace, like the public, like one of the ordinary people who were there as mourners, to wait and pay their respects as the hearse went past, and then they went, of course, back inside to Buckingham Palace and took their respective cars to Westminster Abbey.
I think quite a few bridges were were mended over this time too, because Fergie's obviously back within the fold of the royal family for this. And I noticed also one of the early guests to arrive at Westminster Abbey was Rain, the former Countess Spencer, her father's second wife, with whom she had a very tempestuous relationship in her youth. And apparently in the last 5 years or so, all of that's been sorted out and they've become friends. And consequently, Rain was invited to the funeral after all.
And while we've been here in London, there has been this week quite an almost anti-royal sentiment, because the family has been at Balmoral and not with the people. But I think the moment the Queen spoke last night to her subjects, and she said, "I speak as a Queen and a grandmother," I think that the nation turned right back again and were very happy to have a home back in Buckingham Palace. They had some sort of focus. I think they felt lost without her being here in London at Buckingham Palace. You can understand why they wanted to stay in Balmoral, so they could have that time together as a family unit. But the public needed them here. And certainly, in my opinion, she gave a very emotional and beautiful tribute to Diana.
I think it's been an extremely difficult time because the people of England and the world were caught short by this. They really did not expect anything like this to happen. And I don't think they anticipated their own reactions either. I know, especially in Australia, we were all saying, even people who weren't particularly worried about Princess Diana, they hadn't followed her, they felt affected by it, they felt shattered by it. And when something like that happens, there are so many reactions in grief. And one of them is anger and the need to blame somebody. And I think in the beginning they could focus on the paparazzi, then they moved to the driver when the stories came out about the driver having been drinking, and then they moved on to the royal family because the royal family didn't seem to be feeling the way they were feeling. The fact that they were actually grieving in their own private environment was difficult for people to understand because they just weren't here. And at the moment they came back here and spoke to the public, everything seemed to change.
Yes.
The whole atmosphere in the city changed.
Yes. It was interesting the role that Tony Blair, the Prime Minister, had in organising the funeral service, and almost as a go-between the public and the royal family. He seems to have quite a sense of touch with the public. He seems to be able to know what they're feeling and read their mood, and he was quite a good between the people and the royal family, and indeed I think advised them on how they should handle themselves and how this funeral should take place. Of course, the Spencer family had a very big input into how the funeral was conducted, and they managed, I feel, to blend some tradition with informality, with songs that meant something to Diana. Of course, having Elton John there was quite an extraordinary moment, a brave one. They had asked Pavarotti, but he felt he just wasn't up to it. He felt very emotional, and you can understand that he is an incredibly emotional character.
But when he arrived at Westminster Abbey, he looked totally drained.
Yes.
Absolutely drained.
Yes.
And he's a man who gives his all in his performances, and he felt that he just could not reach the notes, his heart wouldn't be in it. And when you're a singer of that calibre, and in many people's eyes he's the greatest tenor in the world, you want to give your best.
Yes, indeed. I was amazed how Elton John got through the song, to be honest with you.
Absolutely.
Let's return now to the Queen's speech last night and her tribute to Diana, the Princess of Wales.
Since last Sunday's dreadful news, we have seen throughout Britain and around the world an overwhelming expression of sadness at Diana's death. We have all been trying in our different ways to cope. It is not easy to express a sense of loss, since the initial shock is often succeeded by a mixture of other feelings: disbelief, incomprehension, anger, and concern for those who remain. We have all felt those emotions in these last few days. So what I say to you now, as your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart. First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others, and especially for her devotion to her two boys. This week at Balmoral, we have all been trying to help William and Harry come to terms with the devastating loss that they and the rest of us have suffered. No one who knew Diana will ever forget her. Millions of others who never met her, but felt they knew her, will remember her. I, for one, believe there are lessons to be drawn from her life and from the extraordinary and moving reaction to her death. I share in your determination to cherish her memory. This is also an opportunity for me, on behalf of my family, and especially Prince Charles and William and Harry, to thank all of you who have brought flowers, sent messages, and paid your respects in so many ways to a remarkable person. These acts of kindness have been a huge source of help and comfort. Our thoughts are also with Diana's family and the families of those who died with her. I know that they too have drawn strength from what has happened since last weekend, as they seek to heal their sorrow and then to face the future without a loved one. I hope that tomorrow we can all, wherever we are, join in expressing our grief at Diana's loss and gratitude for her all too short life. It is a chance to show to the whole world the British nation united in grief and respect. May those who died rest in peace, and may we, each and every one of us, thank God for someone who made many, many people happy.
The Queen there, speaking live for the first time in 38 years, standing on the parapet there at Buckingham Palace. And standing outside Buckingham Palace is our reporter Stan Grant. Stan, when I was there earlier this week, I met many foreigners, many Australians too, lots of tourists who've been milling around the palace. Have you too had an opportunity to speak with Australians today?
Well, actually, Anne, I'm at Westminster Abbey. Of course, I was earlier this week in the palace, and throughout the week, I did get a chance to speak to many people, many Australians. As you're walking through, of course, people often come up. They hear an Australian accent, perhaps they recognise you. They come up and introduce themselves and talk about what it actually means to be here. I think a lot of them were really surprised and taken aback at the depth of feeling. They wondered about the anti-royal reaction. They then, of course, shared in that coming together, that wonderful healing spirit that you've talked about since we heard the Queen's speech last night.
Stan, it's Susanna Carr here.
Hi, Susanna.
And I was wondering, we were watching some of the guests arrive at Westminster Abbey today, but obviously we didn't have a full coverage of the people who were there. And we saw heads of state and people like Hillary Clinton and Henry Kissinger. What sort of people from positions of power around the world did arrive today? Well,
you've mentioned Hillary Clinton, and of course we saw Richard Branson, for instance, a very close friend of Princess Diana, well known in the world of business, music, transport. He was given a round of applause as he arrived. In fact, it was interesting, Susanna, as many people arrived, Hillary Clinton was one, they were often given a round of applause, which almost sat at odds with the mood here, but I suppose people were just uneasy and wanting to know how they would display their interest or affection for this occasion, and so people were often applauded as they arrived, and it was just literally one person after another. About Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman talking about Australians also in attendance today.
Stan, Tony Blair was really quite exceptional in the way he delivered his reading from Corinthians today. What was the reaction when he arrived? Because he is at the moment the most popular English Prime Minister of all time, isn't he?
The reaction was quite extraordinary. You're right, he is the most popular Prime Minister for a long time. He, like Diana, I suppose, represents a new beginning. He is of a similar age, albeit a few years older, but he represents that generation. He's open to new ideas. He brings a new vibrancy and a new optimism to this country that a lot of these people are sharing. And on an occasion like this, he was able to reach out and touch the hearts of people in much the same way, I suppose, that Princess Diana in life had been able to do as well. And his delivery of that reading was almost Shakespearean in its intensity, and he really did touch that nerve, and you could see the emotion on his face. He was very close to Diana. He'd formed quite a close bond, I think, to many members of the royal family since he's been Prime Minister, and you could really see that etched in his face, and you could hear it in almost every word that he uttered.
It's amazing when you consider that he's been Prime Minister for such a short time, and yet he's a man who's making an incredible impact in the world at the moment.
He's a man, I suppose, who's been plunged into this extraordinary crisis at such an early time, and I suppose the initial reaction is going to be that he's handled it well and that it's going to enhance his standing here. It's a tough time to try to lead a nation through what's been certainly one of its darkest hours, but I suppose in the same way that Bill Clinton in America, being the first post-war born president, it represents a new beginning, and he, I suppose, is the English equivalent of that.
Stan, England's going through an incredible surge at the moment. Apart from this last week, the economy is booming, the pound is very strong. England is in such an incredible position, and yet this has plunged the nation into absolute despair, I suppose, and there's an incredible feeling of flatness here. The shine seems to have been taken off London. Do you think this is going to last for a while?
Well, London, of course, is a city. England is a country with a history of having to overcome enormous challenges. The Queen herself was a young child living through the Blitz. She's seen the depths of despair that people can sink to. This nation has been involved in some almighty wars over the years. It's lived through depression. This is something that the country's going to have to deal with, but it's a nation well known, I suppose, for its strength. In the past, that strength personified by the stiff upper lip. A different strength now, an ability to grieve, an ability to openly show your emotions, and I suppose from that people will draw solace. The fact that they can share in this grief, they can turn to one another and not be ashamed about feeling those emotions. And as they walked away from here today, yes, the mood was sombre, yes, they were reflecting on where they do go from here, but when I was watching them, they were holding each other tightly, mothers holding their babies tightly, husbands and wives holding hands as they walked away, deep in thought. This country will recover, but obviously it's changed forever.
Yes, clearly it has changed forever. Stan, thank you very much. We'll leave you there for the moment.
Thank you.
We have heard that the hearse is within 5 minutes of Althorpe, so we'll cross back to pictures of that shortly. But it is amazing, Susanna, to see the English with such a public show of affection, isn't it?
It is. There's been criticism in the press that perhaps they're becoming too American in the way that they're showing things this time, but then maybe it's a way of venting their feelings. Obviously it's the way they feel at the moment, and they need to display this. And because Diana was such a natural person and didn't hold things back, even in the times of the most unhappiness in her marriage before the marriage officially split, when she would cry in public occasionally, she allowed that to show. And
it was the vulnerability, wasn't it, that seemed to appeal to the public?
Incredibly so, and I think that was reflected very much in Earl Spencer's speech. And I think he did us a huge favour by sharing with us so many aspects of Diana's life in that speech. He talked about her vulnerability, he talked about the fact that the pressure got to her so much that she would descend into floods of tears quite regularly, and the fact that she really wanted to protect her sons from that too. And he made such a point, didn't he, about the family protecting the sons in the future. As to how well they can carry out that promise, who knows, because the paparazzi, the press, have lost their shining light. Who are they going to focus on now?
Well, the obvious one you would think would be Prince William. All the eyes of the world will be on the young princes to see just how they're developing and how they're progressing. They've shown amazing courage for such young boys to walk behind their mother's coffin today. I know their heads were bowed, and I know we didn't see close-ups of their faces in the church. With respect to the royal family and also the Spencer family, they specifically asked that we didn't show their faces during the service, and you have to appreciate and understand that. But maybe they're going to have a few quiet tears now. Let's hope they do have their mother's ability to be able to do that, and they don't have that stiff upper lip that won't allow them to shed a tear.
They've got their aunts to help them, and their uncle is obviously a very strong man, and it seems that he's changed quite dramatically over the years, because in the early days of Princess Diana being married to Prince Charles, he had a bit of a flippant reputation, and he's obviously developed into a very serious and thinking young man, because that was an incredible speech. Also, Diana's two older sisters are there, and they're both incredibly different people. Lady Sarah McCorquodale has been her lady-in-waiting for a long time, so she's been a very, very close friend and sister to Diana. and obviously has had a lot to do with the two boys. Lady Jane Fellows, of course, married to Sir Robert Fellows, the Queen's private press secretary, has had a little bit of a distant relationship with Diana, which is apparently why she's been so upset. Obviously a sister would be upset if a sister died, but because the relationship had been a little bit distant in recent years, because her husband didn't approve of the way the marriage had ended, very much on the royal side.
Right.
It's been very, very difficult for her because obviously she felt that she hadn't resolved that before Diana died. So I imagine the family will pull together incredibly through this.
Well, they have lots of lovely memories of a very deeply moving service today that indeed much of the world must have been watching. One of the highlights, of course, was Diana's friend Elton John and his tribute to her, Candle in the Wind.
Goodbye, England's rose, may you ever grow in our hearts. You are the grace that placed yourselves where lives were torn apart. You called out to our country and you whispered to those in pain. Now you belong to heaven and the stars spell out your name. And it seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the sunset when the rain set in. And your footsteps will always fall here along England's greenest hills. Your candles burned out long before your legend ever will. Loveliness we've lost, those empty days without your smile. This torch we'll always carry for our nation's golden child. Even though we try, the truth brings us to tears. All our words cannot express the joy you've brought us through the years. And it seems to me you've lived your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the sunset when the rain set in. And your footsteps will always fall here along England's greenest hills. Your candles burned out long before your legend ever will. Goodbye, England's rose, may you ever grow in our hearts. You were the grace that placed yourselves where lives were torn apart. Goodbye, English road, from a country lost without your soul, who missed the wings of your compassion more than you will ever know. And it seems to me you've lived your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the sunset when the rain set in. And your footsteps will always fall here along England's greenest hills. Your candles burned out long before your legend ever will.
The tribute.
Generous person.
Spencers have arrived at Althorpe, which will be Diana's final resting place. Of course, we leave them there at the gates as they make their private way in for the burial in the grounds. Only 9 members of her family and Diana's most trusted aide will be also at the burial today.
They'll be moving across to the local family church, the local church first, and having a service there, which has been completely guarded against being intruded upon because it's very much a private service, and then moving back to the property. And apparently there is no bridge to the island, but they've constructed a special bridge for today. It'll be interesting to know whether they construct a permanent bridge, because they're talking about opening the grounds of the Spencer estate a couple of weeks a year so that the public can go in and pay tribute to Diana.
Yes, apparently it was quite a difficult decision to decide to finally lay her to rest there. And the reason being that in her will, Diana had said she'd like to lie alongside her late father. So that's quite sad, but they also felt that the possibility of too many people coming to Althorpe will just be too much. We return now to our Sky affiliate, our British commentators.
Ride, just out of sight of the Knightsbridge stores, not far from Mohammed El Fayed's Harrods, with whose son she was when she died. And while the masses crowded round the giant television screens in Hyde Park, so the great and the good and the famous and the important began to arrive at Westminster Abbey. Karl Lagerfeld, fashion designer. The Emanuels, who designed Diana's wedding dress. Hollywood stars Tom Cruise, followed by his wife Nicole Kidman. Ralph Lauren. Sting, with his wife Trudy. And at the gates of Downing Street, the Prime Minister Tony Blair came out to talk to people waiting here for the funeral cortege to go past. It was he, barely a week ago, who used the phrase "the People's Princess" to such effect. In Marlborough Road, 500 representatives of charities were being marshalled to take their place in the procession. Yet another departure from tradition and protocol, to allow these people from charities for which the princess cared to take part along the final mile to the Abbey. And more arrivals there, Imran Khan and his wife Jemima, one of Diana's closest friends, and her mother, Lady Annabel, Richard Branson and his wife, Mohammed El Fayed and his wife. Their son Dodi had become a close friend of Diana's and died in the same car crash. Luciano Pavarotti, the tenor who said he'd be too overcome to sing at the funeral. And Elton John, who would be singing his rewritten hit, Candle in the Wind, one of Diana's favourites. Outside Buckingham Palace, another break with protocol and tradition, as the Queen came out with other members of the royal family. To stand on the pavement, as hundreds and thousands of ordinary people were doing, to wait quietly for the princess's funeral cortege to pass by. Here was a real reaching out to answer criticism that she didn't show how she shared the grief of the nation. This was a picture of the Queen very much amongst her people. Down the Mall, tradition broken once again. For here the route had been narrowed to allow the crowd to press in on either side, close to the gun carriage as it rolled steadily past. And then another change, as behind the princess's coffin walked not only Prince Charles, William and Harry, Earl Spencer and the Duke of Edinburgh, but also 500 representatives of charities, all now very much together with the crowds, who seemed to support them all on each side. At the Abbey, the Prime Minister, with his wife, pauses to look at some of the floral tributes covering the railings. Diana's mother, Mrs. Shan Kidd, with her daughters, Lady Jane Fellows and Lady Sarah McCorquodale, and other members of their family. Princess Margaret, the Duke of York with his former wife Sarah Ferguson and their 2 children. Hyde Park was by now a sea of people, more than 20 acres, covered by 1 million people, standing as the national anthem was played at the start of the funeral service. In some places they were packed so tightly people could scarcely move. And all following and taking part in the service.
Well, in contrast to those enormous crowds, you can see that the crowds in the Mall are beginning to disperse now. Let's join Alison Jack in Hyde Park with some of those people we've been seeing today.
Hello, good afternoon to you from Hyde Park. The crowds here are also beginning to disperse, but many people are still lingering on. This has been the focal point for the grief of hundreds of thousands of people today who felt that they had to be here, that they had to share in the funeral service, and they were able to do that by partaking, by hearing the service as it was relayed from the loudspeakers and on the large screens as it rang out across the park. People came in droves. They came from all over the world. 2 people who've come here from Los Angeles today are Janet and Victoria. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ali.
Now, you arrived this morning and you're flying back to America tomorrow. I find that staggering. Are you pleased that you came?
It was a wonderful experience. It was incredible.
What has it meant for you to be here today?
It felt so far away. Especially when the tragedy happened, it didn't make sense, and to be here among all these wonderful people, I've never experienced such a peace of kindness, love. It's amazing. The seed that Diana planted, if this blossoms like the flowers that are all over London, it will be incredible. All over London, all over the world, it will be incredible, an incredible legacy for her. She was your greatest export when we came here to be with these wonderful people.
Do you think that this will have a lasting personal effect on you? Will it change your life in some way, having been here today and experienced this?
Oh, absolutely.
Just to feel the love that everybody, you could feel it, that everybody had for each other while they were here. There was kindness, there was no pushing, there was no shoving, no crowding. Everybody was kind to each other, and they left that way too, and I think they took a seed of that with them.
Even the people around us in all ages and obviously all financial backgrounds, and it was amazing. I have such admiration for the people of Great Britain, and obviously Diana inspired this in everyone that's standing around here now.
You're absolutely right. That was very evident. If any evidence was needed that Diana was the people's princess, here it was. People of all ages and all races too. And Akua, you're Ghanaian and you live in London. You felt the need to be here today. Can you explain that to me?
Well, I wanted to come here and then see everything live, because watching it on telly, it's like I was watching a film or something, and I couldn't believe it that she's dead. So once I've seen her going, then I know she's really dead, because I just couldn't believe it.
And now that you've seen the funeral procession and that you've seen the events unfold here today on the screen before you, are you able to take in now the fact that Diana has gone?
Yeah, I'll get over it. I will. But it will take quite a while before I get over it.
One comment I found interesting, which you made earlier, was your surprise when you saw the royal family and your expectance to see Diana standing there.
Yeah, when I saw the royal family this morning, I said to myself, I've never seen them before. This is the first time I saw them. And I was saying, so if Diana was alive, she would have been standing here with the royal family. Now I'd have been able to see Diana personally, see her personally. But unfortunately, she's gone, and it's because of her that we are here.
And finally, if I could just turn to Eunice, your pilgrimage is not yet over. You're leaving from here to go to Kensington Palace to deliver these flowers.
Right.
Just read for us, if you will, your message there.
What this DTPP, that's Diana, the people's princess, as everybody said. You have touched many ordinary people's hearts. May you rest in the Lord's arms. Rest in peace, our dear Diana. That is what the message says.
Your personal message,
My personal message
to Diana. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, everybody here. And with that, it's back to the studio.
Well, here we have the funeral cortege going along the M1 motorway on its way to Althorp. It's going to be a very, very private last stage of the funeral there, where Princess Diana will be buried on a small island on the estate, away from prying eyes. In fact, there's only a pontoon bridge which can be used to connect the island with the mainland, surrounded by trees, some of the trees planted by Diana herself and other members of the royal family. Originally, she was going to be in the vault occupied by her father in the nearby village, but they were worried that that would become a shrine and attract thousands of people from all over the world. And this normally sleepy village of something like 150 residents, it could be a nightmare for them. So the situation was changed, the plan was changed, and now she will be in a sanctuary, an absolutely lovely area on the Althorp estate.
As we've seen earlier, as the coffin goes to Northamptonshire, thousands were lining the route waiting for a glimpse of this cortege as it travelled the 77 miles by road from Westminster Abbey to the Althorp estate. As Bob said, Diana to be buried, of course, on an island on an ornamental lake at her family home. Earlier we also showed you pictures of the progress of the royal party heading towards Althorp. We saw the royal train carrying the Prince of Wales and his two sons, also members of the Spencer family, Earl Spencer and his sisters, arriving at Long Buckby station in Northamptonshire. They disembarked and got into a fleet of Rolls-Royce limousines for the short journey to the family estate. They have now arrived there.
There you can see people actually on the bridges looking down at the cortege as it passes. It's been an uneventful journey, with the exception right at the early start, right at the start, people were throwing bouquets of flowers on the funeral car, and the car had to be stopped briefly whilst the flowers were disentangled. But it's been a quiet journey, characterised only by well-wishers who have been along the route at every available spot, watching quietly and reverently as the cortege passes. There will, of course, be a considerable contrast once on the Althorp estate to London, with its millions of people crowding around, tremendous reception for the funeral itself, tremendous outpouring of grief and adoration for Diana. In this area that she will finally rest is extraordinarily quiet. And of course, we heard her brother say in the Abbey just how terrible her life had been from the point of view of the way that she was pursued, he said, by paparazzi, and generally given a bad time by the intrusion of the media. And that presumably means all of us. Now she will be, her final resting place could not be in a more tranquil setting. You can see there on top of the hearse that bunches of flowers, and some of the flowers you can see right in the front there that have stuck to the windscreen. Well-wishers threw them, but they were actually unwelcome, of course. All the bridges along the motorway and the side roads, the slip roads, have been thronged with people who have wanted to catch a glimpse of the party taking Diana to her final resting place. In London, of course, the crowds are dispersing. Here, they've been waiting all day for a glimpse, and just a glimpse, just a few seconds, a few minutes of the funeral cortege.
Well, earlier we showed you pictures of crowds beginning to disperse over at Hyde Park in central London. Similar story over at Westminster Abbey. Our reporter Simon McCoy is there.
Thanks, Lisa. Yes, Westminster Abbey was the focus, wasn't it, of the nation's, of the world's grief today. Two people who were in that service join me now, Wayne Sleep and Krista Berg. Her link with show business is what made her different, isn't it, Wayne? Have we done justice to Diana today?
Oh, I think so. I think it was a wonderful mixture. When Elton sang that song, I think it was dead right to include it in the service. And it didn't jar at all, not one iota. But I think the star of the show, if you'd like to call it that, was her brother. I mean, that was an amazing speech.
It was a very strong message about the paparazzi, and to hear clapping in Westminster Abbey on a day like this was quite something.
It's incredible. Apparently it started outside and went right through the Abbey. You know, she said to me 2 years ago, she said, thank you for remembering my birthday, which I always did anyway. But she said, you know, there is nothing I can do anymore that is not known. She said, I mean, I can't even keep a secret anymore. She was really upset about it at the time.
Chris, the message from Earl Spencer today very much was leave the two boys alone. Don't let them go through this. I know I've spoken to you in the past about this. You knew Diana too. Someone's got to listen, haven't they?
I don't know. I suppose over the years I've become cynical because one waits for the next big thing to happen. This is the way, for example, terrorists have always worked. They do an outrage and they just wait for that to calm down slightly and there'll be another one. But I think on this occasion, the love that this woman has generated on such a massive scale all over the world has also turned to a greater understanding. As Earl Spencer said, she was Diana the Huntress and also the most hunted woman on earth. And one of the reasons why Wayne and I in the church, in Abbey, were so upset as we heard his voice breaking with emotion, was the knowledge that was there anything that we could do to stop this? There have to be defences. And I think there is, obviously, at the end of this century, we need media. It's the most powerful explosion of modern communication worldwide. We need it. Everybody, you can't say I'm guilty because I buy a paper with a picture in. That's wrong. But what she needs is greater security. And I was in the Czech Republic on Sunday morning doing a show for flood victims, and I heard the news. And I turned round to a big burly Englishman with me, and I said, Diana is dead. And this big guy just burst into tears, and he said, why didn't they protect her? She was our princess. He said, she was our princess. Why didn't they protect her?
Yeah. Wayne, one thing about Diana was her ability to just treat normal people with a special affection. Where is the monarchy without that, do you think?
Well, I mean, the monarchy is for the people, to serve the people, and there must be that relationship. I mean, obviously, the monarchy is based on traditional values, and traditional values don't change very often at all. And it's very hard to change the rules and the red tape. And I think she was very brave in the way she tried to do that, knowing she would come under fire.
We're also joined, I'm pleased to say, by Lord Attenborough. Please come in, sir.
Hi, how are you?
Nice to see you. Hello, nice to see you.
We're just talking about the paparazzi, the way the press dealt with Diana, and the message from Earl Spencer. Do you think the world will listen?
Oh, I'm quite sure they will. I think there will be public outcry if they don't. I thought perhaps the most moving occasion or moment in the entire service was that when Charles Spencer finished speaking, outside, the people listening and watching, applause started.
We were here. It was quite amazing.
Nobody applauded in the Abbey to start with. It was silent. And that applause, that public statement, that public determination that what she stood for should not be for, moved into the Abbey until the whole Abbey.
It's awesome, wasn't it?
I've never heard anything in my life. A memorial service, a funeral.
No, I mean, you always told not to clap in a church, aren't you?
That was the answer. That was the people saying, you must listen.
And Charles Spencer, of course, said that. I mean, he said her blood relations will see that happen.
The concern, obviously, and firstly for him, obviously, were William and Harry.
Yes.
What is the message to television executives, newspaper editors after today?
Give them their time. Give them their space.
I agree with you, Wayne. If you went to her home, as my colleagues have many times, I'm sure, you go into the main sitting room and there are pictures of all sorts of people around the place. 90% of the pictures are with William and Harry, or of William and Harry. And if she cared about anything above everything else, it was their future. And she was absolutely determined that this protocol and ring fencing of the royal family was something which she found unacceptable, and that if the royal family and our hierarchical establishment in this country was to continue, they had to be made aware of the cruelties of life. That's why she didn't just back the obvious charities. She backed AIDS, she backed leprosy, she backed homelessness, she backed drugs.
She backed victims of our society.
Absolutely. And those with no voice.
Yes, yes.
Those who couldn't speak for themselves.
So
now, if she does that, and if that is continued to the understanding of Prince William and Prince Harry, then her life will not have been totally in vain.
That is her legacy. Lord Attenborough, Christa Berg-Wainsley, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Westminster Abbey, still talking about today's service as we will for many, many years to come. For now, let's go back to the studio.
Simon, thanks very much indeed. Let's join our political editor, Adam Bolton, at Buckingham Palace. Adam.
Yes, indeed, Bob. An air of relative calm has returned to the area outside Buckingham Palace. I suppose you could say that there has been a national catharsis brought on by the tragedy of Princess Diana's death, where, perhaps to the surprise of foreign observers who keep on talking about the British stiff upper lip, there's been a good deal of frank talking from the public, from the press, from the politicians, and also, indeed, eventually from members of the royal family. I'm joined now by Douglas Kay, who is a distinguished biographer of the Queen. Mr. Kay, we were told by the constitutional experts at the beginning of the week that the death of Diana had no constitutional significance. Well, I know that's technically right, but in terms of the way Her Majesty does her job, do you think this week's been highly significant?
Yes, I think it'll have a tremendous impact. Not immediately. I don't think we can expect to see things change immediately, but I don't think anyone can forget this week. The Queen, excuse me, I've been talking too much, especially the Queen. I think she will take note of what has happened this week. She will take note particularly of Earl Spencer's remark. So I think she, like many of us, might have been surprised by the fact that he expressed them in a funeral service. It was quite extraordinary.
In him saying basically that the royals were out of touch and he wanted to ensure that Prince William and Prince Harry stayed in touch with real people and ordinary people. That is really of a piece with this talk of the people's princess and the need for a people's monarchy, indeed.
Oh yes, he said what the Spencers feel. And what he particularly feels very strongly, and that was echoing what the public, a large number, I wouldn't say the whole of the public, I think we've had the vocal public today and during this week. There is another side to it, and whether they're the silent majority or not, we'll have to find out. But there's no doubt that this week's events will change the way the monarchy is portrayed and the way the royal family portray themselves.
And obviously, from what the Earl had to say, considerable bitterness between the Spencer family and the House of Windsor.
Well, I don't know if bitterness would be the word, but I think certainly there have been differences of opinion. I think it may be that underlying some of the events of the last week and the arrangements for the funeral was a feeling on the behalf of the Spencer family, which has not emerged properly before, that they feel that perhaps the royal family and the way the royal family treated Diana was reprehensible, and that therefore those feelings are still there, and so there may be a sense in which they blame the royal family, not the Queen, I'm sure, herself, but the attitude of some courtiers and the way they didn't protect Diana. But on the other hand, Diana didn't want to be protected.
Now, Princess Diana now being laid to rest in her family home. I know you have an interesting insight on this rather trivial but nonetheless interesting debate about whether it's Althorpe or Althrup. What is the answer?
Well, it is trivial, and perhaps Earl Spencer would not thank me for saying it, but his father I once interviewed at Althorpe House, and one of the first questions I asked him is, how do you pronounce your name? I'm told some people say it's Althrup and some say it's Althorpe. And he looked quite baffled as he did, and remember he did. He's the kind of person who looked quite baffled at times. And he said, well, I've always called it Althorpe, and after all, it is my name.
So Althorpe, perhaps it is. Thank you very much indeed, Douglas Kay, for joining us. From Buckingham Palace, back to you.
Adam, thanks very much indeed. Well, as Adam was saying, calm is just beginning to return now to central London, particularly outside the royal palaces. Crowds are beginning to disperse. Hyde Park in particular, you'll remember, was an absolute sea of people earlier on. Our reporter James Forlong is there.
Well, many of those people have now passed through Hyde Park. The scene here is much quieter than it has been this afternoon, as many thousands made their way home. Many people, of course, coming from all over Britain to be here, to be in the capital today for the day of the funeral. Among them, Bill Wayman and his family, who've come down from Southend. Bill, tell me, why did you feel that you needed to be here in London?
Well, I could have sat at home and just watched it on the box, probably like many others, but there was some gut feeling that maybe had to be here. I had to say goodbye properly, and this was the only way to do it, to be present at her funeral.
If I could turn to you, what was the most emotive time for you today?
I think it was when Al Spencer was talking about his sister, and the last time he said he saw her in July, but the last time when in March they spent some time together, and he said that they managed to keep the paparazzi away, and I thought that was, you know, a shame that she always had to live her life in so much limelight, that she never had any private moments at all.
Bill, there was some very harsh criticism meted out towards the paparazzi and the media in general by Diana's brother. What were your feelings about his sentiments?
Wholehearted. I think there should be a point, or somebody within the governmental systems that says, right, you've done your bit, sling your hook. You know, enough is enough. And there are other occasions where they need their total privacy. They should have it. That's really all I can say. You know, it should be acknowledged as that.
What for you was one of the most emotional times of today?
Elton John.
Yeah, Elton John.
Why was that?
Well, not often I break down, but that got to me. And there was something, the way that it was sung and the words within it, it was like, it's hard to explain it. I suppose from a Christian point of view, it was a spirit, it's like releasing Diana. She's with the Lord. That's it, you know.
Could I turn to you, Gloria, and ask, would there be other events like this that would make you want to come down to London, or was this for you very special?
It was just very special. I don't think there was anyone else that so many people...
Well, in London, crowds are starting to disperse, but what are they doing up in Northamptonshire, where the hearse is still due to arrive? The 7 Network reporter, Michael Gleeson, is there. Michael, what's the situation? Are there many people on the streets there?
And there's no question that in the last hour or so, the crowd here has really begun to swell. I've just made the trek about 2 kilometres from Althorpe House. I'm in a small village. The Althorpe House is surrounded by about 5 hamlets. And, of course, the Spencer House is Althorpe House, and that's where Lady Diana, Princess Diana, in fact, will be laid to rest in the middle of an island on the estate at Althorpe House. Now, I've just come up from Althorpe House, and there are about 500 or 600 people that are gathering there now, and it's a profoundly sad place to be right now, you know. It's a slightly different mood from the mood that I felt in London when I was there over the last 3 or 4 days, because the people here, many of them actually knew Diana personally. She came to this area when she was about 14 years old, and she grew up here largely, and the people here have a far more personal connection with Princess Diana than many of the rest of the people in England who feel as though they know her, but really don't know her. The people here know her.
Yes, indeed. There's some discussion about whether she would be happy resting there, but from what we hear and what you tell us about her contact with the locals, it was a very happy time for her.
There's no question about that, you know, but there is a mixed feeling here as to whether she should be interred in the local church beside her father, which was the original intention of the family, or whether she should in fact be on the lake, a place where she visited, which she visited many times with her sons and with Prince Charles. You know, there's an old oak grove which is there, and it's a tradition within the family dating back to the 1500s that family members should plant oak trees around the lake and near the island. And Princess Diana, in fact, and the Princes Harry and William did plant oak trees there. So it's clearly a place that was a happy place for her, and in light of the somewhat tragic life she's had, maybe it's quite fitting that she should be interred in a place where she was very happy and which has very fond memories for her.
Michael, are they happy there that they're going to receive from now on so much attention? I mean, the word Graceland's been used a number of times. Are they happy about that?
You know, I think the reality of it is that there will probably be less attention than there would have been had she been interred in the local church. And it was a move by the family to make sure that the local villages around here, and indeed the church itself, which is a very small church and so quaint in this part of the world, didn't become another Graceland. You know, it's true that the family was concerned for the safety of the area, with so many tens of thousands of people who were likely to flock here. Tiny roads, and a very quiet place. And it's not, I think they were just quite concerned that it wouldn't be fitting if it became a tourist attraction to the extent that there would be tens of thousands of people coming. So what they've decided to do is to actually open the house and open the island where she will be buried, maybe for a couple of weeks a year, and the Spencer family will decide when that will be. And then the people who love Diana so much will be able to visit her gravesite there, but only for a short time.
It seems to be a very beautiful part of the world where you are right now.
Oh, look, Anne, this is quintessential England. Now, as we drove down here today, you see the stone houses, you see the thatched cottages, and it's an area of Britain that Diana was very proud of, and it's an area of Britain that the people here are very proud of as well. You know, the interviews we've done today, they speak in such fond terms of how she would come here, how she used to go to the local dances, how they used to have garden parties at the house, and she was very much a member of the local community. And the community itself is so very proud of what she did. And look, they've turned out in their, I would say now in the thousands. The 2 kilometres from where we are now to Althorpe House, there are literally people, I would say here, in their thousands. And a very sad sight indeed, walking along here, I can tell you.
Can you tell us who lives in Althorpe House now, Michael?
You know, Anne, as you heard during the funeral, Charles, Princess Diana's brother, is the new Earl. Now, as I understand it, the house is largely a tourist attraction, although it is in fact still the seat of the Spencer family. And I believe he now lives in South Africa. And the reality of it is, though, that when he's in Britain, this is where, the place where he lives. And this is still going to be the seat of the Spencer family. And, of course, for the next several weeks, this is where they will reside while they're still in this period of mourning.
I suppose all the locals have many, many stories to tell about Diana and her youthful time there. And indeed, they'll be coming out more and more as time goes on. But Michael, thank you so much for joining us from Althorpe there now. And we'll be returning right now to our British commentators in Sky.
These are the scenes across London as the crowds disperse from the funeral of Diana, Princess of Wales, and ultimately Princess of the People. The world seemed to stop today to say goodbye to Princess Diana. 2 million people crowded into central London to mark her passing.
This is Lisa Aziz and Bob Friend with live coverage of the funeral of the Princess of Wales. The Queen led the nation's mourning at Westminster Abbey. But it was the Princess of Wales's brother, Earl Spencer, who stunned the congregation. He used the platform of a worldwide audience to renew his attack on photographers and pledge a different upbringing for Diana's sons, Princes William and Harry.
It was, as promised, a unique day for the woman who, in the words of her favourite hymn, was our nation's golden child.
There was a moment when the crowd first caught sight of the funeral procession, the princess's coffin topped by flowers from her children, that the people's grief became unbearable. The long journey home on this early September morning had begun out of sight of the cameras as the casket at sunrise was gently placed on the gun carriage. At exactly 9:08, the funeral cortege moved slowly out of her former home at Kensington Palace at the start of the 4-mile route to Westminster Abbey. The coffin, draped in the royal standard and covered with wreaths from her family, lay on an oak board suspended above a 13-pounder gun which had seen service in the First World War. Drawn by members of the King's Troop Royal Artillery, flanked by 8 guardsmen of the Welsh Guards, the foot guards to the sovereign, maintained a slow and stately pace down South Carriage Drive. The muffled tenor bell at the Abbey marking the progress of the procession minute by minute. London had become a place of pilgrimage today. Those in the crowds that lined the route, at times 20 deep, were united in collective grief, paying their last respects and playing their part in a moment of history. Mostly they remembered her in absolute silence, a silence that enveloped the procession as it moved slowly through Hyde Park towards the Abbey. Most seemed numbed even after a week of mourning, unable to comprehend their loss. Outside the gates of the palace, the extended royal family, gathered together for the first time since the tragedy, waited to pay their respects before leaving for the Abbey. And waiting for their mother up the Mall at St. James's Palace, the two young princes, William and Harry, who had somehow, somewhere, found the strength and the courage to join the mother they adored to walk alongside her for the last time. And behind them, not the massed bands and serried ranks of soldiers, so much a part of other royal funerals. Here were the princess's friends, the representatives from more than 100 of her charities, streaming out behind the coffin, keeping company with their patron on this, the long last mile to the Abbey.
And here we have the funeral cortege leaving the M1, going along junction 15 of the M1 on its way to Northamptonshire. The body of Diana will not, of course, now be resting next to her father, but instead will be actually on the Althorp estate on a little island surrounded by a lake and the most beautiful countryside imaginable. A quiet resting place in contrast to the hubbub we've seen today, of course, with hundreds of thousands of people congregating in central London. It'll be surrounded by trees which she and members of the royal family helped to plant. Diana's brother, Earl Spencer, said the island could be properly looked after by her family and visited in the privacy by her sons, but it's also planned once or twice a year to allow the general public to come and pay their respects. There were worries that if she were indeed put alongside her father in the family tomb, it might attract far too many tourists to this very tranquil village.
And as you can see, many hundreds of people still lining the route as Diana goes to her final resting place. This now we're watching as the cortege coming off the M1. This is junction 15A, cortege leaving the motorway and travelling the remaining 10 miles or so to the Spencer family seat at Althorp via the A43 dual carriageway and the A45 Upton Way on the outskirts of Northampton. Passing by Northampton Town FC's Sixfields Stadium, onto Bants Lane, and then the A428 through the picturesque village of Harleston, which has a fairly traditional part of the world. At the edge of the village, about a mile from Althorp, is a memorial to a previous member of the Spencer family, Charlotte Countess Spencer, who died back in 1903. This whole route, of course, some 77 miles long. Thousands have lined the route. Many more thousands of flowers have been thrown to the cortege. You were seeing that, that there was a veritable mountain of
flowers which have been thrown by well-wishers. That did cause some trouble on the outskirts of the M1 because it actually obliterated the driver's view of the road, and the hearse had to stop so that they could be cleared.
We were telling you earlier, by the time the hearse reached Newport Pagnell in Buckinghamshire, it was being escorted by a large group of outriders and police cars with their blue lights flashing, as you can see. People continued rushing to meet it, lining the road, standing on bridges, many taking photographs, some cheering.
At first there were plans to try and keep the roads as clear as possible, or at least the sides of the roads, and indeed those bridges. But obviously the authorities relented when it was made quite obvious that there were a lot of people, a lot of disappointed people who wanted to make certain they at least caught a glimpse of the cortege and could pay their respects on this extraordinary day. You can see the crowds building up there. That's in contrast to central London, where from all the main areas the crowds are slowly dispersing and going home, some of them with a dreadful feeling of anticlimax after the build-up to the funeral and this very emotional day shared by something like 2 million people in London and a massive television audience around the world.
This cortege now progressing along the road. It's already come off the M1, of course, at junction 15A. The cortege progressing at some 35 miles an hour. And in the meantime, of course, as we saw earlier, the royal party and the Spencer party disembarked from the royal train at Long Buckby station, and they have already arrived at the Althorp estate.
Now, the funeral began at precisely 11 o'clock. The princess's brother, Earl Spencer, in his tribute to his sister, attacked the press.
Through the great west door of Westminster Abbey, the Welsh Guardsmen carried Diana's coffin towards the nave. The nation held its breath for the young soldiers as they transferred the coffin onto the catafalque, the most onerous duty these young men are ever likely to perform. The ceremony was to embrace many traditional aspects of an Anglican funeral, but also some modern touches, reflecting the Queen's words that this would be a unique service for a unique person. The occasion will also be marked by a shattering address from Diana's brother, Earl Spencer. Outside the Abbey, as at many points throughout the country, giant television screens broadcast the service to hundreds of thousands of people, some of whom joined in the singing of Diana's favourite hymn. In a sad echo of a happier day, the Prime Minister read from the same passage of Corinthians, which had formed part of Charles and Diana's wedding in 1981.
When I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now, we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as also I am known. And now abideth faith, hope, love, these three. But the greatest of these is love.
And then the moment which reflected the extent to which the people had dictated the tone and character of the service.
Goodbye, England's rose. May you ever grow in our hearts. You are the grace that placed yourselves where lives were torn apart. Called out to our country, and you whispered to those in pain, now you belong to heaven, and the stars spell out your name. And it seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the sunset when the rain set in. And your footsteps will always fall here along England's greenest hills. Your candles burned out long before your legend ever will.
Since Diana's death, Elton John's Candle in the Wind has been the most...
All right, let's return now to the scenes as the funeral cortege heads to the Althorp estate, of course, in Northamptonshire. Showed you earlier the cortege leaving the M1 at junction 15A, now travelling the remaining 10 miles or so to the Spencer family seat at Althorp via the A43 dual carriageway and the A45 Upton Way. Currently on Bants Lane, we understand. It will then go on to the A428 through the picturesque village of Harleston. At the edge of the village, about a mile from Althorp, a memorial actually to a previous member of the Spencer family, Charlotte Countess Spencer.
It's been a long journey, of course, and a slow journey. Originally, I think they were going to drive rather faster than this along the M1, but the attention and the interest has been such that certainly in the side roads they've slowed down to allow well-wishers to catch a glimpse at least of the cortege. There were worries earlier on because so many people were throwing bouquets at the hearse that they were lodging on the top, building into a pile and causing some hazard. And at one moment the hearse actually had to stop while the flowers were removed.
And so the end of this historic and sad journey is now near. Princess Diana is almost at her final resting place at the family estate of Althorp, and in a few minutes from now the hearse will sweep around the corner and come to the gates of the estate. You will see that there are flowers on the ground outside the gate at the entrance to the estate, and when the car sweeps up that drive, then that will be the end of the journey as far as we're concerned. We won't see the hearse anymore, and that will be the end of this rather historic day. The crowds that you can see gathering for this final moment, there are the gates of the estate now, and you can see more flowers. As we said earlier, flowers have just carpeted this kingdom from north to south in a huge display of affection, and something like £50 million has been spent in these floral tributes right throughout Britain. Two police standing there waiting for the hearse to arrive, and it should now only be minutes. The estate, of course, has been in the family for many, many years, and Diana Spencer is not the first Diana Spencer in history. Around 1782, Diana Spencer enters the history books for the first time. It was planned for her to marry the Prince of Wales, but the Prime Minister at the time, Walpole, blocked the wedding for some obscure reason of state, and she married the Duke of Bedford instead. But this Diana Spencer, of course, I dare to say, will go down in history as a much more famous Diana Spencer. She was, of course, as everyone knows, the most famous and photographed woman in the world. Still being photographed, of course, in the last moments of this historic procession today. Coming through the village, still crowds lining the procession route, and it won't be long now before she comes to the end of her journey. The hearse still covered in flowers that have been thrown from the roadside and from bridges along the way. Before it set off on the M1 on a high-speed run, it stopped, and all those flowers were removed and put on the side of the road. But since then it's picked them up again, and once more is covered in flowers.
Well, the Spencers first came here in 1486, and each generation since has been born in the big house and buried in the family chapel of the nearby parish church of St Mary the Virgin. The first, Sir John Spencer, who was knighted in 1519, transformed the church and ordered the chapel to be constructed, a symbol of his power and wealth. And the wealth came from sheep grazing, the power from backing the winning side in the War of the Roses.
This is the village of Bants Lane that the hearse is moving through at the moment. And of course, as we've said before, her final resting place is on this beautiful island in the middle of a lake on the family estate. And as we've said, a bridge is expected to be built to the island so that for a few weeks a year the island will be open to the public so they can pay their respects to her.
More applause from the locals who are just trying to find some way of expressing their feelings. You don't normally hear applause in a funeral procession, but there it is.
And again, a carpet of flowers almost on the road. The next village is the village of Dunstan, which is something like 2 miles from the end. Children lining the route, and of course children have been involved. A favourite of Princess Diana, and there's a lovely story told by one of our colleagues whose little girl cried when she heard that all the whales had died. I thought that was a lovely touch.
They may be building a permanent memorial to the princess outside the park. In a statement, Earl Spencer said it's been decided to bury Diana, Princess of Wales, in the grounds of Althorpe Park, where her grave can be properly looked after by her family and visited in privacy by her sons. Of course, the decision to move was made because of fears that interment at the chapel in the Church of St Mary the Virgin would have overwhelmed the Northamptonshire village with visitors for years to come.
So we've been through Dunstan. The next village, tiny little villages these in a beautiful part of England, is Harleston.
The princess will be buried in a private ceremony on an island in an ornamental lake known as the Oval, 100 yards from the house. The area was consecrated on Thursday. A bridge has been built for the ceremony to enable mourners to walk to the island. And the Spencer family plans to continue to open Althorpe Park for several weeks each year, enabling the public to view the burial site.
Well, the princes have arrived up here by train, Prince Charles and Harry and William, and so that's why we haven't seen any sight of them at this stage. Just how many flowers have bloomed in England?
Yes, it's quite extraordinary. I believe they've had to fly in extra supplies from overseas. Israel is a big source of flowers for Britain, and normally at this time of the year they do send a lot of flowers to Britain, but the demand has been overwhelming, an extra 5 million. Some astounding figures.
Still a few miles to go, we understand.
And as far as the flowers are concerned, outside St James's Palace, they plan on leaving them there until they die. So people can still come and remember I mean, the funeral is over, but the mourning certainly isn't. It'll be interesting to see just how long it does take the public to recover from this.
And that enormous task of taking the messages from all those bunches of flowers outside Kensington Palace, taking all those messages and giving them to the boys. I mean, that's an incredible token.
Yes, the young princesses seem to gain some strength from reading those messages. They spent time at Balmoral looking at the messages on the flowers there, and I think they were really touched, and the reality hit home as to just how much their mother was loved. They loved her as little boys do, but did any of us realise how much she was admired and loved right around the entire world?
Seeing the whole thing on television is one thing for the boys up in Balmoral. They'd have seen coverage of the flowers at Kensington Palace and Buckingham Palace. Even outside the Harrods store at night, there was quite a vigil being conducted there at night with candles being lit outside the window that was dedicated to Diana and Dodi. But actually seeing those flowers in reality would have been an entirely different thing. That incredible sea of flowers outside Kensington Palace gates, those beautiful gates.
And the aroma.
The aroma, the perfume, the smell of the scented candles, and the crowds that were milling around in Kensington Gardens. Just the most astonishing feeling there, very, very peaceful. The crowds queuing out into the street with flowers every day of the week. And the boys to finally arrive on Friday and see what must have been close to an acre of flowers, I suppose, by the time Friday arrived.
Susanna, you were in London for Lord Mountbatten's funeral.
Yes.
Can this be compared?
An entirely different funeral, because Lord Mountbatten, of course, was a deeply loved member of the royal family, Prince Charles's favourite uncle, and killed in that fateful explosion by the IRA on a boat back in 1979. But his funeral, of course, was a funeral of the royalty, a state funeral, with all the pomp and circumstance, all the military bands. And the most stirring moment of that funeral, I felt, was when the funeral carriage came by, and behind the funeral carriage was his horse, and in the stirrups on the horse were his boots turned the wrong way round, which is a tribute to a soldier when he's died. And Prince Charles was very, very distressed when Mountbatten died, and I think he tried to draw on that experience to help Prince William. But of course, Prince Charles was 30 when Lord Mountbatten died. It's a great difference in the maturity of the person, but even so, he definitely was very, very close to that man, and I think he's probably tried to use that. He's definitely also called upon Peter Phillips, the son of Princess Anne, and Captain Mark Phillips, who's a boy of about 20, and very much loved by the two young princes, who see him as a bit of a role model.
He's a sporty
He's a very
kind of
sporty
guy.
person, and
He
apparently
plays
the two
football, they
princes
like
are.
that,
Yes, and he's a very well-balanced young man, as is also the daughter of Princess Anne. And I think he's been a very valuable member of the royal household up at Balmoral in helping the princes through this week. It's been a very emotional time for them, but of course now it's the time of the Spencer family in Northamptonshire.
And do we think that Diana would have been happy with the events of today? Do you think she would have been pleased with the way the service went, with the wonderful music,
the combination of the ordinary people, the people who she related so well to? Well, let's face it, she related well to every walk of life. That was her incredible skill, wasn't it?
I think she probably would have liked to have seen more children along the way.
Yes, and the funeral at Westminster Abbey was very moving, but still had that formality which she always liked to override. But that incredible speech by her brother, I think she would have been so stunned that someone could sum up her life so skillfully. It's quite a break with tradition, because for 400 years the Spencers have all been buried in that church of St Mary the Virgin. And on Thursday, in the bright sunshine, the bishop arrived at Althorp Park and consecrated the ground in the middle of that small ornamental lake, which they call the Oval, with the trees that are planted by the children, because you cannot bury a Christian person on unconsecrated ground, so that had to be done. A lot of people have expressed the fear that maybe it's a little bit lonely, but then she is in her family ground, And it is in an area that she feels she would have felt very comfortable with.
Does anyone live? We don't know whether anyone actually lives at Alltop, do we?
Well, because Earl Spencer has gone to South Africa, there is obviously nobody apart from maybe some staff in residence there all the time.
So that sounds fairly lonely, doesn't it? Really?
It does sound fairly lonely. There was a great deal of controversy about Althorp Park during the last years of the former Earl Spencer, because his second wife, Rain, took a great hand in redecorating much of the buildings there and the interiors, and people accused her of turning it into a Monte Carlo hotel. And also they sold off a lot of the treasures, but the reason behind this, they explained, was that it's so incredibly expensive to keep up one of these stately homes of England, and they don't get much help with it. And yet the public go to visit there and they expect a certain standard, and so they, over the years, have sold off some of the treasures. But it does seem a lonely place now, and if it's a place that the family gather, it's not very frequently.
Well, Michael Gleeson told us a little while ago that it was a very, very beautiful place. And indeed, the collection of rare trees surrounding the Oval has been planted by members of the royal family, the Earl Spencer and their families, since 1833. Prince William and Prince Harry have both planted oaks in the immediate vicinity, as have the Princess, her father, her brother and her two sisters.
One of the interesting things about the Spencers and their life in London too is that Spencer House, which is the home of the Spencers when they come to the city, is just behind St James's Palace, looking onto Green Park. And so everything has been very close there. The body has been lying in the Chapel Royal in St James's Palace for all of the week up until Friday evening, very close to where the Spencers have spent so much time over the last couple of centuries when they were in the city.
Just moved through the village of Halston, as you saw the sign there just a few moments ago.
At least on that island, she may find some final privacy, something she craved and didn't receive very much of.
I think the people of Great Brington are going to be very, very grateful that the Spencers have taken this action of burying her within their grounds, because Great Brington is a very tiny little village. It's got a pub called the Fox and Hounds. It's got a post office. That's about all. They've got no parking spaces, not even a public lavatory. So it's a very small place to become a pilgrimage, which of course it would become. And the Spencer family have said they really can see no end to that. Diana is going to go down in history, and over the years the visits will just keep continuing.
Now just a couple of minutes away, I would suggest. Do you know this part of the country, Susanna?
I've never been there, no. Not north of London.
I keep saying 2 minutes away, but around every beautiful English road there is another village.
Another bend and another village.
But it's extraordinary, isn't it? It's like the funeral procession is just beginning for these people who have been waiting for hours and hours for the procession to arrive at their own homes.
And what a different church service this will be to the one that has shown the public face of Princess Diana, with the members of international entertainment industry, people in high positions in government. I believe King Constantine of Greece was there, although not a great deal of the royalty of Europe chose to attend or were invited. This is a very untypical funeral in that. Usually you get prime ministers and presidents, but it's been much more personal on a much more personal level. And what an incredible gesture that the Spencer family agreed to, that was suggested by the Prime Minister in Downing Street, that some people who were at Kensington Palace should just be given the invitation to go to the funeral in Westminster Abbey. They actually went outside Kensington Palace and handed out invitations to some members of the public, and what a memorable day that must have been for them. This is all part of the Althorp estate, which is a very extensive estate when you see pictures taken from the air. And the cars now are on the final approach, and once again completely covered in flowers.
This is the final approach. You do know this part. You do know this part of the road.
Well,
The driver can barely see outside, out the windscreen at the moment. And there they are, the gates of Althorp.
welcoming her home for the last
Yes.
time.
And the final time, some privacy. A park, a lake, an island, and a patch of grass. Offers Diana's memory the most fragile quality in nature's gift, tranquility. May she rest in peace.
And as the gates close, that brings us to the end of one of the saddest and most historic days in British history. A day full of emotion, but also of goodwill, especially to the Princes Harry and William, and especially William, who is seen as the shining light for the Windsor future.
Diana stood for the poor, the disposed, the excluded. With her warmth and humanity, embraced everybody in every condition of life. And that's why she's mourned across all barriers of class, race and privilege. And so we say farewell to the People's Princess and goodbye to all of you in Australia. Our thanks to our colleague Susanna Carr and to all our reporters. Thank you for joining us on this historic occasion.
Good night.
Good night.
Elton John now sings Candle in the Wind.
Goodbye, England's rose. May you ever grow in our hearts. You are the grace that placed yourselves where lives were torn apart. You called out to our country and you whispered to those in pain. Now you belong to heaven and the stars spell out your name. And it seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the sunset when the rain set in. And your footsteps will always fall here along England's greenest hills. Your candles burned out long before your legend ever will. Loveliness we've lost, those empty days without your smile. This torch we'll always carry for our nation's golden child. Even though we try, the truth brings us to tears. All our words cannot express the joy you've brought us through the years. And it seems to me you've lived your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the sunset when the rain set in. Your footsteps will always fall here along England's greenest hills. Your candles burned out long before your legend ever will. Goodbye, England's rose. May you ever grow in our hearts. You were the grace that placed yourselves where lives were torn apart. Goodbye, England's rose, from the country lost without your soul, who missed the wings of your compassion more than you will ever know. And it seems to me you've lived your life like a candle in the wind, never fading with the sunset when the rain set in. And your footsteps will always fall here along England's greenest hills. Your candles burned out long before your legend ever will.